If someone once saved you from darkness, only to later turn your love into a calculated game, then this story is for you. 10 years ago, Lucas Parker, my husband, pulled me out of my stepfather's hands, like a hero in a teenage dream. I gave him 7 chances. So when he betrayed me, then asked to get back together, I still said yes. Until I heard the reason he gave his friends for wanting to reconcile. The penthouse in River North was lit brightly, its large glass windows reflecting the neon glow of the city below. Laughter echoed from the living room, mixed with the smell of cigarette smoke and expensive whiskey. I stood outside the door, clutching the fruit tray I had just prepared, heart pounding like it wanted to break out of my chest. Through the narrow gap in the door, I saw Lucas Parker sitting there, lazily leaning into the chair, a cigarette glowing red between his long fingers. He exhaled a stream of smoke, an indifferent smile curling on his lips. I've invested too much time in her to just walk away like that. I counted silently in my head. This was the 6th time. Olivia's average-looking. Her personality isn't anything special either. The only thing she's good at is still being kind of fun. I just have to lift a hand, and she already knows what to do. Lucas casually flicked ash off his cigarette, his voice cold, as if he were talking about an object rather than the woman he once swore to protect. The men in the room burst out laughing, a suggestive, cruel kind of laughter that felt like knives stabbing into my chest. Never thought Olivia, quiet as she looks, would have such a hold on you, huh, Lucas? Someone joked. No wonder he's trying to get back with her, another added, laughing louder. Lucas chuckled, slowly blowing out smoke. I've already put in this much time, might as well keep going and make it worth it. Just a door between us, but it felt like a dagger pierced straight through my heart. I stood there, frozen, watching him through the gap. Lucas, now 30, was no longer the smiling teenage boy who saved me 10 years ago. He was now a successful man, sharp-featured, with a face that looked effortlessly composed, like someone used to being in power. Money and success had polished him, but they'd also exposed the indifference and calculation in his eyes. The loud laughter inside the room stopped abruptly when I pushed the door open. I walked in with the tray of fruit, a gentle smile on my lips, like I hadn't heard a thing. "What's so funny?" I asked softly, my eyes scanning each person, not missing the shock and guilt written all over their faces. The room suddenly turned heavy, awkward. One guy coughed, trying to cover the tension. But Lucas, he stayed calm as ever. He looked at me, that same half-smile on his face. Not the slightest hint of fear that I might be hurt, that I might be broken. He was so confident, he didn't even bother hiding. Thankfully, one of his friends reacted quickly, instantly jumping in with a rushed voice like he was trying to save a situation on the verge of blowing up. "Olivia! I heard Lucas prepared an anniversary gift for you. Even flew overseas a whole month in advance to custom order a gown from a famous designer. We just heard about it. And who wouldn't say Lucas is madly in love with his wife?" The others around chimed in right away, forced laughter filling the suffocating silence, like a thin coat of paint trying to hide a deep crack in the wall. "Exactly, Lucas is the perfect husband," another added, voice pitched unnaturally high, while their eyes darted around, glancing at each other nervously. I just stared silently at Lucas, locking eyes on his face, where that indifferent smile slowly faded, replaced by a subtle tension, his lip twitching slightly, brows tightening like he was calculating his next move. Because both of us knew damn well that so-called anniversary gift wasn't for me. I'd never worn dresses, never liked anything glittery or over the top. 3 days ago, I saw that gown with my own eyes, hanging in his closet, a striking red dress adorned with countless diamonds that sparkled under the lights, reflecting like falling stars. Elegant and seductive, just like the woman who would wear it. That night, After all the guests had left, the apartment sank into a heavy silence, like a thick fog. I showered, hot water pounding against my skin as I tried to wash off the invisible filth left by those words. But they clung to me like deep cuts in my heart. I laid on the bed, the soft cotton blanket wrapping around me, but in the dark, Lucas's hot breath landed on my neck, reeking of cigarette smoke and leftover whiskey, making my skin crawl. I pushed him away, my hand touching his solid chest, but it was no use. His arms only tightened around my waist, locking me in like iron clamps. I turned my head, quietly looking at him in the dim light, seeing nothing but eyes glinting with desire. Lucas's voice was hoarse, breath heavy. "What's wrong?" I tried to inch away, my body stiff. "I'm a bit tired today." Maybe another time, sensing I wasn't responding. Not even a single gesture. Lucas lost interest. He let go with an annoyed sigh, got off the bed, and lit a cigarette. The flicker of the lighter briefly lit up his face. "Is this about that dress?" he asked, his tone flat but defensive, smoke curling through the air, the sharp scent stinging my nose. I didn't answer, just stared at the dark ceiling. He rubbed his forehead, his voice rising. "It's just a dress, Olivia. You're being overly sensitive." I muttered a faint, barely audible like a whisper in the wind, not wanting to drag this out, because every word only made the wound bleed more. He angrily stubbed out the cigarette. "There's a business gala next week, formal wear required. Since you refuse to wear dresses, I'll take Jessica instead." I'd never been one for dresses or appearances. My wardrobe was filled with gray, loose outfits, simple like who I am, no frills, no show. Jessica Ryan was his assistant, a woman who always looked flawless, radiant with bold red lipstick and heels. She was the one. Lucas betrayed me with her, with the secret texts, the late-night meetings I once pretended not to notice. My silence in his eyes turned into irrationality and annoyance. His voice turned cold, like a gust of icy winter wind. "I've said everything that needs to be said. Jessica and I aren't what you think." He turned, slammed the door, leaving me alone with the darkness. I stayed still on the bed, tears silently rolling from the corners of my eyes, soaking into the pillow, salty with pain. Lucas once said, even if I didn't wear makeup or dress up, to him, I was still the most beautiful. But now, every word from him felt like blame. Blaming me for not being pretty, for making him look bad, for not being someone he could show off like a trophy. I wiped my tears away slowly, my hands trembling, and silently counted again in my heart. This was the sixth time he shattered my heart. I didn't sleep all night, my eyes wide open in the thick darkness of the room, my mind spinning with Lucas's words, the suggestive laughter of his friends. My body lay stiff under the blanket, the ticking of the clock echoing like hammer blows against my ears, dragging out every second. When I finally came to, it was already late afternoon, the orange-red light of sunset slipping through the curtain slats, bathing the room in a warm glow that made me blink a few times before realizing I had drifted off into a restless sleep without even noticing. The phone beside my pillow lit up blindingly with a string of missed calls from an unknown number. I picked it up, hesitated for a moment before hitting call back. The phone rang twice, then a woman's voice came on. She was a nurse. She said my mother was seriously ill, her condition very bad, and urged me to come visit her while I still could. I cut off her drawn-out guilt-tripping, my voice cold and dry, like ice, emotionless. "You've got the wrong number." Then I hung up immediately, the sharp beep slicing through the air like a knife. I tossed the phone aside. It landed softly on the bed, screen dimming. Truth is, it wasn't the wrong number, but I didn't want to go back. I hated her with the kind of deep bitterness that never healed, like an old wound that bleeds every time it's touched. I lost my father very young, when my memory of him was already just a blur of broken pieces. To earn money to raise me, my mother worked in another city and left me in a relative's house, where I grew up on leftover food and pitying glances. I learned to stay quiet, learned to shrink myself into corners, dressed in dull gray so no one would notice me. The laughter of neighborhood kids rang through the windows, like a reminder that I didn't belong. It wasn't until I was 17 that my mother came back, her face more worn, streaks of gray in her hair, and she brought a man with her. She said she had remarried, had finally found her own happiness. Now she wanted to bring me home to live with them. And I, carrying a young heart full of hope, followed her, leaving behind the old place with dreams of a real home. But I didn't know then that the start of her happiness would be the beginning of my pain. That man, my stepfather, looked polished and friendly on the outside, with a wide smile and soft voice whenever she was home. He patted my shoulder affectionately when greeting me, and at first, I actually thought he was kind. But when she wasn't around, he changed. His eyes stuck to me like a predator. The accidental touches began, his hand brushing my back as I washed dishes, his breath hot on my neck when I bent to pick something up, making my skin crawl and my stomach twist. Years of being passed around had made me timid, insecure. I just bowed my head, avoided him, never dared to speak up for fear of being thrown out again. And when he realized I wouldn't resist, he pushed further, his actions more blatant. Under the dinner table, his foot rubbed against mine, slow and deliberate. The rough feel of his shoe against my skin made me freeze, my chopsticks clattering to the floor. But he just smiled, a smile that made me want to disappear. I timidly told my mother, "Mom, I think my stepdad is harassing me." I waited, hoping she would hold me, protect me like a mother should. But she was silent for a moment, her eyes cold and suspicious, like she thought I was lying. Then she snapped, her voice sharp with anger. "You're still young and already thinking such filthy things? Stop making up nonsense." I broke down crying, panicking, tears running down my face as I stammered, "I'm not lying, Mom. I'm scared. He touches me. But her frown deepened, that look of suspicion turning into disgust, impatience, like I was a burden getting in the way of her new happiness. In the end, she ignored my cry for help, chose to believe him, and it all ended with a blazing slap, leaving a red sting on my cheek, followed by a cold threat, her voice hissing through clenched teeth. "Don't you dare say that to anyone else, or you'll regret it." I stood there, feeling like the whole world had collapsed, nothing left but loneliness and fear choking me, teaching me how to stay silent forever. Lucas wasn't home. We'd argued last night, and I figured he wouldn't be back for dinner. So I told the housekeeper there was no need to prepare a meal. She looked at me with concern, but just nodded, packed up, and left, leaving me alone in the empty space. I stepped out by myself, the chilly Chicago evening wind whipping against my face, carrying the smell of exhaust and the blaring horns of the street. I drove aimlessly, my hands gripping the cold leather steering wheel, eyes fixed ahead but mind adrift, not really knowing where I wanted to go, just wanting to get away from that suffocating apartment. Passing by a food truck district, the smell of grilled meat and spicy seasoning drifted through the open window, and my stomach growled. That's when I realized I hadn't eaten all day. Back in college, Lucas and I used to eat tacos from a truck near campus. Hot tortillas filled with ground beef, crispy lettuce, and spicy sauce. Back then, it felt like the most luxurious reward I could give myself after a week of scraping by. Years had passed, and that taco truck was long gone. Luckily, a small coffee shop still stood, tucked into the corner of the street, with its faded wooden sign and the warm scent of freshly roasted coffee. I used to share the details of my daily life with him, texting him regularly, trying to hold on to what we had. But his replies were always distant, just a cold, "yeah," or "busy." The phone screen lighting up only to go dark again, dragging my heart down with it. I didn't think much of it, because that's just how he was. Cold with everyone, speaking on the phone like it was a business meeting. I always believed, as long as I kept showing up with warmth, As long as I stayed persistent, eventually he'd be moved, that I could melt that layer of ice. But it turned out, he wasn't incapable of being moved. He just wasn't moved by me. I stopped in front of that small cafe where Lucas and I used to get sandwiches and coffee when we were still dating. The smell of fresh pastries in the air, the sound of sizzling from the kitchen, bringing back memories of him holding my hand, whispering, "You're everything to me." Someone next to me nudged my arm, snapping me out of the mess in my head, and only then did I notice people staring at me, curious, sympathetic looks, like I was a living statue out of place in the crowd. Just as I stepped out the cafe door, the cold air brushing past my face still tinged with coffee, I saw Lucas, sitting there with Jessica. Jessica Ryan, beaming, her teeth gleaming under the lights, hand brushing his arm, her voice bright. "Go on, I'm listening." Lucas looked at her with a tenderness I rarely saw, a soft smile on his lips, eyes glowing. I stood there watching them for a moment, my body numb, but strangely, not in pain, just hollow like all feeling had drained away. As I turned to leave, Lucas spotted me. His brow furrowed, and he got up, walking toward me. "Why are you here?" His voice low, tinged with surprise and irritation. I answered honestly, calmly, "Dinner?" He frowned deeper, raising an eyebrow as if interrogating. "The housekeeper didn't cook?" I shook my head slightly, eyes averted. Felt like a change. Jessica Ryan stood beside him, smiling and waving. "Olivia, you're here too? Want to join us?" Lucas's gaze softened a bit, and he looked at me, his voice gentler. "You haven't eaten yet. Come have something." I took a step back, keeping distance. "No need. You two go ahead." I drove myself, but Lucas suddenly grabbed my wrist, his fingers gripping tightly, pulling me toward the table with a force that didn't allow refusal. "Come on, don't be dramatic. I'll have the driver take your car home." Suddenly, I felt so tired. Too tired to resist, so I let him pull me down into the seat across from him and Jessica Ryan, the cold wooden chair biting into my skin. Jessica playfully stuck her tongue out. "Maybe Olivia should sit over here instead." Lucas answered casually, gently touching her hand. "It's fine. It's just a seat." Jessica giggled, her voice high-pitched. "Don't be mad, Olivia. Lucas and I are just used to sitting like this." I quietly ate my sandwich, the bread dry and catching in my throat, pretending not to hear the provocation in her voice. I couldn't even remember the last time I had one of these sandwiches, just that now, it didn't taste the same. The flavor was gone. Bland, empty, like my life at this moment. When we left, all three of us got in the same car. Jessica sat in the front passenger seat, smiling brightly, adjusting the rearview mirror. Lucas said softly, "She gets carsick easily." I stayed silent, sitting in the back, curling up, watching the city lights blur past the window. When Lucas got out to pump gas, the door thudded shut behind him, and it was just me and Jessica in the car. She raised her perfectly manicured fingers, long, bright red nails glinting, and waved them in front of me. At first, I didn't think long nails were practical either. But Lucas said, "Since I'm young and pretty, I should take care of myself more." Her tone was sweet, but laced with mockery, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror to catch my reaction. I gave her a faint smile, nodded, my voice steady. "Yeah." "They look great." She paused, her smile faltering, then lowered her voice like she was confiding in me, but her words cut like knives. "Olivia, you and Lucas don't even love each other anymore. Why cling to something that's already over? Men like beauty and excitement. Even if you hang on, it won't make him love you." I didn't respond, just stared out the window, the wind slipping through a crack and bringing the city's noise with it. My heartbeat was strangely calm. She was about to say more when Lucas returned. He opened the door and got in. "What were you two talking about?" Jessica quickly answered, "Girl stuff. Director Lucas, are you curious too?" All right, I'm nosy," Lucas replied with a teasing tone, laughing. tapping her thigh lightly before starting the engine, its roar filling the car. But when he glanced at me in the rearview mirror, he froze for a second, his words trailing off, something uneasy flickering in his eyes when he saw my silence. I acted like I didn't notice the flirtation between them, leaning back against the seat, closing my eyes to fake sleep, breathing evenly but fully awake, listening to Jessica's giggles and Lucas's deep voice drifting through the car like a song out of tune. After dropping Jessica Ryan off at her high-rise apartment, she waved goodbye sweetly. "Bye, Olivia. See you again." I was the one who spoke up first, cutting through the silence. "Lucas, I want to go away for a few days." I decided to return and see my mother one last time, not to forgive her, but to face the past and put an end to it. I stood outside the hospital room, looking through the small glass window. My mother lay there, frail, no longer resembling the woman who once turned a blind eye to my cry for help. Her hair had mostly fallen out, just a few sparse strands clinging to her scalp. The face that was once full and rosy was now gaunt and shriveled, her sunken eyes glistening with tears. A breathing tube was inserted into her nose, the steady beep of the monitor echoing like the fading heartbeat of a life near its end. Inside me stirred a sharp, small wave, as if old memories were clawing at my chest. Since the day I left home 10 years ago, I had never gone back. This was the first time in a decade I was seeing her again. She spotted me through the window, her eyes widened in disbelief, and she called out, her voice hoarse and faint. "Olivia! Is it really you?" She waved her thin, trembling hand, as if trying to reach me through the invisible barrier. But I stood still, unmoving. She now looked ugly, stripped of the pride she once wore when she chose her own happiness over me. She cried as she apologized to me, over and over again, without stopping. She began to care about me like a normal mother would, worried about my future. Eventually, she said, she regretted it. I listened quietly. "I regret it, Olivia. I was wrong. I shouldn't have left you." Words I once longed for with all my heart now fell into the void, weightless, like dead leaves drifting to the cold ground. 10 years ago, when my stepfather broke into my room while my mother was away, the creaking of the door hinge was like a warning, but I didn't have time to run. He pinned me down, his breath reeking of alcohol, his rough hands clenching my shoulders, the sound of my shirt tearing loud like a silent scream. The first thing I thought was, "Mom, please save me." But she wasn't there. I struggled, screamed, and with the last of my strength, shoved him off and ran out into the street, called the police, my heart pounding, body trembling like it was about to shatter. But when my mother rushed into the police station, her eyes red, she didn't hug me, didn't ask if I was okay. She listened to him, believed I had misunderstood, that I was over-imagining things. She stood there, her gaze cold, and told the officer, "She's just sensitive, probably misread his good intentions." I stood behind her, tears streaming down my face, feeling betrayed again, deeper, more painful than anything he did to me. What I hated wasn't that she didn't arrive in time, but that she chose to believe him, leaving me to face that trauma alone, to bandage invisible wounds by myself. If I were to forgive her now just because she's pitiful, I would be betraying myself, the girl I used to be, living off scraps in someone else's home, swallowing shame in silence, the girl who had to learn that silence was survival. I stayed just 1 week, paid for her treatment, not out of love, but because she gave birth to me, and that was the last responsibility I owed her. That was the last time we ever saw each other. When I returned to Chicago, dragging my dusty suitcase behind me, the city had already sunk into a deep purple dusk, the tall buildings reflecting neon lights like shattered glass. Before heading home, I deliberately stopped by the old bookstore where Lucas and I used to go back when we were still madly in love. I bought him a fountain pen, its black lacquered body engraved with intricate patterns, as one final attempt to hold on to a beautiful memory between us. In one corner of the bookstore, there was a wall covered in sticky notes, yellow, blue, and pink scraps filled with handwritten messages from passing strangers. I didn't expect to still find the note the two of us had written together, back when love was still fresh. Lucas's handwriting was bold and strong. Lucas will love Olivia Harper forever. A promise once made by a young man, passionate and sincere, now lay alone on the wall, faded with time. I stood there, running my fingers across the words. Without thinking, I took the note down, folded it neatly, and slipped it into my coat pocket. By the time I got home, it was already dark. I punched in the passcode. My birthday. A combination that hadn't changed since we moved into this apartment. But the door didn't open. An error beep echoed. After 3 failed attempts, just as I was about to call Lucas, the door suddenly clicked open. Standing in front of me was him, Lucas, in a wrinkled white shirt, messy hair, and a frown on his face like I was some intruder. He looked at me, his brows furrowing reflexively, his voice cold. "Why are you back?" Before I could answer, a sharp female voice called out from inside the house. "Lucas, who is it?" Jessica stepped out from the living room, wearing a thin, pearl-colored silk nightgown that hugged her body, her damp hair falling over her shoulders, shimmering under the light like she had just come out of the shower. Her jasmine perfume filled the air, sickeningly sweet. She froze when she saw me, her eyes wide in fake surprise. "Olivia, why, are you back?" Her voice pitched high, but the curve of her lips betrayed a smug smile she could hardly hide. I stared directly at Lucas, eyes locked, waiting silently for an explanation. His face showed a flicker of irritation. He rubbed his forehead and said sharply, "Don't get the wrong idea. Ryan's landlord gave her trouble, and she hasn't found a place yet, so I let her stay here temporarily." He emphasized the word temporarily, like that could somehow erase the reality in front of me. I gave a small nod, signaling I understood, but inside I was counting. This was the 7th time, and it would be the last time I let him trample over my heart. I clenched the fountain pen in my pocket, the cold metal pressing against my skin like a reminder of my past naivety. Without a word, I turned to leave, dragging my suitcase behind me. Lucas thought I was just throwing a tantrum, and his voice rang out behind me, irritated. "Olivia, stop making a scene. Can you stop assuming everything between us is dirty like that?" Jessica stood next to him, flashing a provocative smile before quickly masking it. She stepped closer to Lucas, her voice sweet, full of veiled meaning. "Olivia, if you're uncomfortable because of me, I can move out, if that helps." Her eyes sparkled, like she was playing a role in a drama where she already knew she was the lead. I smiled, shook my head, my voice calm. I had already let go. "No need, I'll leave." My suitcase was still by my feet. I pulled it gently, unburdened, as if everything in that apartment, from the elegant gray sofa to the artwork I once picked, no longer belonged to me. Lucas grabbed my arm again, his fingers tightening around my wrist, his face a mix of fatigue and frustration. "Olivia, you never used to be like this. Why are you being so unreasonable and dramatic now?" His voice sounded like blame, like I was the one at fault, the one disturbing his fake peace. I looked down at his hand, then slowly pulled the folded sticky note from my pocket, opened it in front of him. The words, "Lucas will love Olivia Harper forever," appeared. The blue ink faded, but still clear. "Let's get a divorce, Lucas," I said, without a hint of hesitation, like delivering a final verdict. He looked like he was about to speak, his lips parting, but when his eyes met the note, he fell silent, his face pale, his hand dropping as if all strength had left him. I didn't wait any longer. I pulled my suitcase and walked out of the apartment, leaving Lucas and those broken promises behind. Leaving Lucas's apartment, I didn't feel suffocated, didn't feel like collapsing in pain the way I used to. No more nights waking up to tears, already soaking my pillow before dawn. I checked into a small hotel, and I slept soundly, no dreams, no restlessness. That Lucas no longer loved me. There was a time I couldn't believe it. A time I completely broke down, fell into despair, endlessly blamed myself, rummaged through the past looking for reasons, trying to hold on to the shattered pieces of a love already dead. I gave him 7 chances. 7 times I forgave him. 7 times I hoped. But each time was just a deeper wound. When did I start to accept it with calm? Maybe the 5th time. I don't remember exactly anymore, just that now, breaking up with him felt like a burden lifted, like wings long imprisoned had finally been released. And still, every now and then, thinking of him, my heart ached quietly, like an old scar that never fully faded. I threw myself into work. As long as I kept busy, there was no room left for tangled memories, for Lucas, for my mother, for all the betrayals. It sounds ridiculous, but I never wore dresses. I used to love them, until the day my stepfather gave me one and tried to do something unspeakable. From that moment, I never dared wear dresses again, but I still designed them as a way to heal. And somehow, I ended up becoming a wedding dress designer. My studio was full of white silks and crystals that sparkled under the lights, like tiny stars fallen from a dream. My latest client was a man, rare in this industry, Matthew Carter, tall, brown-haired, with soft blue eyes, had come to order a wedding dress for his ex-girlfriend. He sat across from me in the studio, his warm voice filled with regret as he described her. She always dreamed of a wedding dress that was simple, but elegant, nothing too flashy. Just like her, I carefully asked for all the details, my hand gliding across the paper, sketching delicate lines. A soft white silk gown, with a gentle V-neck, and a train just long enough to glide like a wave across the floor. After finalizing the design, I threw myself into work. Matthew stood before the dress, fingers lightly brushing the silk fabric, his eyes far away, as if he were seeing her walk in that dress in a dream. I stood beside him, explaining the details. I chose Italian silk for the bodice, light and smooth, so she'll feel comfortable. The train is. But my voice faded. My vision darkened. The room spinning. I hadn't eaten since morning. My blood sugar was crashing again. My body wobbled, nearly collapsing onto the cold wooden floor. Luckily, Matthew caught me in time, his arm steady, keeping me upright, his voice full of concern. "Are you okay, Olivia?" I gave a weak nod, trying to pull away from him, when suddenly another hand yanked me back, firm and furious. My vision cleared, and I looked up. Lucas stood there, his face stormy, eyes bloodshot like a hurricane brewing inside him. His voice was icy cold, each word like ice water splashed over me. "Olivia, are you that desperate for a man? Can't stand being alone for even a second? You ask for a divorce and immediately run to someone else?" His words were a slap to the soul, freezing me from head to toe. I didn't think, just reacted. My hand rose and struck him hard across the face, leaving a vivid red mark on his cheek. We knew each other too well, which meant we knew exactly what to say to hurt the most. And Lucas, more than anyone, knew that after he pulled me out of the hell with my stepfather, my mother used the ugliest words to humiliate me. He knew all of it, so when he said what he did, he should have known. I would never forgive him again. I calmly pulled my hand away from his grip, my voice cool but unwavering. "Lucas, let the lawyers handle it. After this, there will be nothing left between us." He stood frozen, the red mark still burning on his cheek, his eyes wide, as if he couldn't believe what I'd just said. He pointed at Matthew, voice trembling with rage. "It's because of him, isn't it?" His face twisted, ridiculous and pathetic, like someone trying to cling to something that's no longer theirs. I looked at him, and a strange sense of vengeance surged within me. Our last breakup had been the same. I was the one screaming, breaking down, like someone gone mad. "He's my client," I said. Lucas snapped, his eyes blazing, stepping closer, growling. "You're hugging him like that and saying it's nothing?" But even as he spoke, he paused, like he'd just realized what he said. I stared straight into his eyes, unwavering. So, when it's someone you care about saying things like that, you know how to get angry too? My words were the final blow, cutting the last thread between us. Matthew stood beside me, silent but ready to intervene, his eyes full of concern, but choosing not to step in, letting me face it myself. I turned away, walked back to the desk, picked up the wedding dress sketch, and got back to work, as if Lucas had never even been there. The last time I left, I did it too hastily, carrying only a small suitcase, a few sets of clothes, and the broken pieces of my heart, as if deep down I still held on to a sliver of feeling for Lucas, a faint hope that he might change. But this time was different. I left no room for hesitation. I called a moving crew to the apartment, determined to take everything that belonged to me. I wanted a clean break, no ties left behind. Only, while sorting through sketches in the workroom, I realized one design was missing. It was the one I had drawn for myself. The wedding dress I sketched back when I was deeply in love with Lucas, when we lived in that shabby apartment with peeling walls. We were so broke we could only afford pizza on weekends, sitting on the floor, laughing beside grease-stained cardboard boxes. We had nothing but love. But for me, that was everything. Lucas once held my hand, his eyes glowing under the dim lights, and said, "Once I make money, the first thing I'll do is marry you." Back then, neither of us ever doubted those words, as if the future was already mapped out, bright and flawless. I drew that wedding dress, believing that love would conquer fear. I revised it hundreds of times, every stitch, every fold. But in the end, it remained just a sketch, never turned into an actual dress. I asked Lucas if he'd seen it. His eyes flickered with guilt. "It's just a drawing. It's not that important." I frowned, still insistent. "I want a clear answer, Lucas." He sighed, rubbed his forehead, as if I were making a fuss over something petty. Finally, when he saw I wouldn't let it go, he reluctantly admitted, voice low, almost a whisper, "Jessica saw it the other day. She said she liked it, so I gave it to her." His words were like a cold wind slicing through my chest, leaving behind a dull, hollow ache. I stared at him quietly, trying to find a trace of the young man who once stood in the rain, pulling me from my stepfather's house and promising to protect me forever. But the man before me now was a stranger. "You don't even wear dresses!" he suddenly snapped, raising his voice like he was defending himself. "What's the point of keeping that sketch?" I stood there, still clutching the stack of papers, each of his words hammering down on my memories. "Lucas, there won't be any more chances between us," I said. A flicker of panic flashed in his eyes, as if he didn't believe I was serious. But quickly, he masked it, curling his lips into a faint, dismissive smile, like I was just being dramatic. He knew I had forgiven him before. Even after I knew he cheated, I still came back. I'd screamed, fallen apart, but I didn't leave. In his eyes, I loved him too much to ever walk away. These breakups? Just emotional outbursts, nothing to take seriously. Give it time, sweet-talk me a little, and I'd come back again, just like I always had. Lucas thought he knew me, thought he understood my weakness, but in truth, he didn't understand me at all. I'm someone who's always been timid, raised in other people's homes, so I learned to treasure even the tiniest kindness, exaggerating it in my heart like someone starved for affection. A little warmth, a little care, was enough to keep me from walking away. That's why I set a limit for myself, nothing more than 3 chances. Anyone who had ever been good to me, I allowed them to hurt me up to 3 times. I would forgive 3 times, as a way to repay their kindness. But with Lucas, because he once pulled me out of my stepfather's darkness, because he was the only support I had during those years of emotional famine, I broke my own rule. I gave him 7 chances. 7 times I forgave him, a mix of love and gratitude. When the love began to fade and only gratitude remained, I started waiting. silently, not knowing when he would finally use up the last of his chances. What I feared most was owing someone. No matter how disappointed I was, I still endured. But now, between Lucas and me, things are finally balanced. He used all 7 chances, and I owe him nothing anymore. Habits are a terrible thing, like a hidden dagger that slices into my heart when I least expect it. To numb my emotions, I buried myself in work. On long nights, as the ticking of the clock echoed through the new apartment, I learned to drink. The bitter burn on my tongue, like a temporary sedative for old scars. The day my mother died, I drank myself into a stupor. I hated her deeply for the years of abandonment, for that slap, and for the words that cut like knives into my heart. But when she was gone, I still sat by the window, watching the rain shimmer on the streets below, feeling empty and strangely sad. Maybe loneliness had clung to me too long, like a quiet shadow following every step, making me long for someone. Not much, just someone to be there, to talk to share the simplest things. So when Matthew Carter came back to the studio one last time to check on the wedding dress, I didn't just talk about fabric and stitching. In the gentle afternoon light, as he softly brushed the white silk on the mannequin, I asked, "Why did you order this dress?" Matthew smiled faintly, the kind of smile laced with bitterness. His soft blue eyes looked far away, like they were searching for a place he could no longer reach. "I couldn't marry her, but I still can't let go," he said, voice low. Just one sentence, but it carried so much weight. I looked at him and saw a familiar pain in his eyes, the kind only people who've been tormented by love understand. Unexpectedly, I found myself relating to him. And just like that, we became closer, sharing evenings at a quiet little bar. Matthew was measured, composed, a gentleman. I didn't know how to drink, but I stubbornly kept drinking, trying to drown myself in bitter wine, letting it fog my mind. Each time, Matthew quietly took me home, his steady arm guiding me through the streets. One night, after he sent the dress to his ex, and it was returned, he grew quiet. In the dim bar light, his face was shadowed, and his blue eyes had turned dull. The wine in his glass rippled constantly. He sat there saying nothing, just drinking in silence, like trying to drown the hurt. To comfort him, I told him about Lucas, about the 10 years I thought I had survived all my pain, thought I had happiness in my grasp. I scoffed, my voice hazy from alcohol. In the end, a young, dazzling girl like Jessica showed up. And he forgot me, forgot all the promises. My words trailed off. The glass in my hand tilted, a few deep red drops spilling onto the table, like tiny stains of blood. Matthew frowned, gently took the glass from my hand, his voice low but firm. "Olivia, you've been through enough with the wrong man. But the future, it can get better." I looked at him, and in that wine-induced haze, my heart stirred slightly, like a flower petal falling onto the surface of a still lake. He took me home, like always. He knew my door code, entered it without hesitation. Suddenly, a figure appeared on the stairwell. The sharp smell of cigarette smoke hit me. Lucas was standing there. He looked at us, his eyes cold, his voice shaking with anger. "Olivia, didn't you say he was just a client? And now you two live together?" He marched toward us, grabbed my wrist, his grip tight and painful, like he wanted to pull me away from Matthew. I yanked my hand back, the pain jolting me sober. But Lucas still clung on, his eyes flashing with desperation and rage. Thankfully, Matthew stepped in, his arm shielding me, pulling me away from Lucas's grip, his voice cold. "A cheater has no right to interrogate anyone." Lucas ignored him, tried to pull me back again, but Matthew blocked the doorway, his gaze icy. "If you had any self-respect, you'd leave her alone. If you bother Olivia again, I'll call the police." "She deserves peace," Lucas growled, his voice rising. "Who the hell are you?" "What right do you have to interfere?" Matthew didn't answer. He simply looked toward the apartment, where I stood watching, and his eyes said everything. Lucas didn't care. He shouted my name. "Olivia! Get out here!" Matthew's brows furrowed, and he shoved Lucas back from the door, slamming it shut. His voice was sharp. Do you really have to cause a scene? The commotion outside pierced through the silence of the night, making my head throb, my drunkenness still clouding my thoughts. I rubbed my forehead, forcing myself to stand, and opened the door. In front of me were Matthew and Lucas, standing face to face, flushed with anger, the air between them thick and ready to ignite. I spoke up, my voice weak but firm. Stop! Looking at Matthew, I felt guilty. I gestured for him to go inside first, then turned to Lucas. Let's talk privately. Lucas looked at me, his eyes full of bitterness, his voice trembling. Olivia, is this how you treat me? Lucas, I told you we're done. Did you think I was joking? I replied, my voice cold, trying to suppress my headache. He started to speak, his voice breaking. It's because of him. I cut him off before he could finish. No, it's because of you. His eyes widened, stunned, as if he couldn't believe how firm I was. You're upset about Jessica? I can explain, he said, almost pleading. I waved a hand, tired. I don't care about you two. But Lucas, I don't love you anymore. Do you understand? His voice cracked. No way, Olivia. You love me. But I looked at him, completely unmoved. Once, that look in his eyes would have broken me. But now, it just made me feel sad. Like watching a pathetic version of my past self during our first breakup, screaming and sobbing like a fool. I warned him, voice sharp. Lucas, one more time, and I'm calling the police. He stood there, hurt, stunned, as if he couldn't believe I was truly done. I said nothing more and closed the door in his face. The sound of it slamming shut felt like a final period. The lights inside were still off. Matthew stood in the dark, the light from the window casting soft shadows on his face, gentle but concerned. You really don't love him anymore, do you? He asked, his voice low, as if needing to be sure. My nose stung. That feeling, of someone worrying for me, protecting me, was like a warm breeze brushing away the cold in my heart. In that moment, my heart pounded, emotions rising like a volcano I could no longer hold in. I reached out, my fingers trembling as they gently touched his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin. Matthew froze for a moment, but didn't pull away. His blue eyes looked into mine, gentle, steady, like a calm lake. Matthew, what if we give this a try? I asked softly, a little shy. He lowered his head, stayed silent for a moment, and just as I started to pull my hand back in hesitation, he caught it. His voice was warm and deep. Let's try. That night, we didn't talk much. We simply sat together in the quiet apartment. I leaned on his shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of his breath. The next morning, I woke up with a slight headache from last night's drinking. But the awkwardness that usually comes with a new relationship had already faded. Matthew and I started dating like any ordinary couple, simple and warm. We went grocery shopping together, pushing a cart down colorful aisles. He quietly dropped in my favorite cookies, and I picked out the coffee he liked, sharing smiles along the way. We held hands on walks, cooked simple dinners at home, and for a while, it felt like the kind of love I had always dreamed of. But every morning, as Matthew and I walked down the stairs, Lucas would be there, standing at the bottom like a shadow that wouldn't leave. He never said anything, just watched our hands clasped together, too afraid to step forward, too stubborn to walk away. He came every day, like a persistent habit, but to me, he was just a stranger now, someone who no longer meant anything. Matthew and I ignored him, walked past as if he didn't exist. One evening, I curled up on the couch under a warm blanket, a bowl of popcorn and a plate of cookies beside me. The TV played a comedy, laughter echoing from the speakers, but it couldn't fill the empty space inside me. Matthew sat next to me, his shoulder brushing mine, his warmth making me drowsy. My eyelids grew heavy. Suddenly, a loud pounding rattled the door like a hammer. I jolted upright, the blanket slipping to the floor, heart pounding. Annoyed, I opened the door, my sleepiness replaced by irritation. In front of me stood Jessica, drenched from head to toe, her blonde hair plastered to her face, and in her arms, Lucas, flushed, eyes glassy like he was burning up with fever. As soon as she saw me, her eyes flared with fury. She pointed a shaking finger at me, shouting, "Olivia, can you stop haunting us like a damn ghost? You're divorced already. Why won't you leave him alone?" Her words grew harsher, as if unloading all her rage onto me. I brushed her hand aside and looked her straight in the eye, my voice cold. "If you can't take care of your man, who's to blame? It's not my fault he keeps showing up here." Jessica froze, her mouth open but speechless, as if her own words had just backfired. I remembered clearly. When I found out about her and Lucas, I once approached her gently, worried she was being misled, trying to warn her. But she just smirked, looked me in the eye and said, "Only pathetic women let their men slip away." That day, I realized how stupid I was to care about her. Now, those same words came back to her like a sharp boomerang. Lucas, still feverish, tried to get up, his eyes clouded as he looked at me, then pulled at Jessica's arm, whispering, "Let's go." But Jessica yanked her arm away, tears in her eyes. "I'm not going." "You broke up with her. Why are you still going to her?" Lucas winced, irritated. "What I do is none of your business." Jessica screamed, her tears mixing with the rain. "You said you had feelings for me. Now you're saying it meant nothing?" I stood there, cold and silent, a mocking smile flickering across my lips. Lucas glanced at me, clearly wanting to explain, but I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen, ready to call the police. "I told you, next time you cause a scene, I'll report it." The cops arrived quickly. The door camera had recorded everything: Jessica's screaming, her pointing, her accusations. Lucas, burning with fever, was escorted into the police car, mumbling, "Olivia, I'm sorry." I pretended not to hear, turned around, and walked back inside. The rain still fell outside the window, as if trying to wash everything clean. A few days later, a package arrived. Inside was the wedding dress sketch I once drew for myself, along with a handwritten letter. I didn't read it. I didn't want his words touching my heart again. I took the package to the balcony, lit a flame, and watched as the paper caught fire. The sketch and letter burned into ash, the smoke rising into the air, carrying my past away with it. The sky inside me suddenly felt clearer, as if a dark cloud had finally lifted. I no longer needed wine to sleep. I no longer woke up with tears on my pillow. Life passed peacefully, still and quiet, but also bland and empty. I started to realize I didn't truly love Matthew the way I thought I did. He came at the right time, like medicine for wounds still bleeding. But once the pain eased and my mind cleared, I saw we didn't truly fit. Our evenings together no longer stirred anything in me, just a sense of comfort, like two friends leaning on each other to get through a storm. Matthew grew distant too, less texting, fewer visits, and something deep inside me knew. His heart wasn't really with me. When news of a small earthquake in his ex-girlfriend's city appeared on the headlines, I casually brought it up. Matthew's lashes trembled slightly, his eyes flickered, but he kept a straight face, held my hand, and said, "No, I won't reach out to her." I smiled, said nothing, but I knew he was already thinking about her, and just as I expected, he did reach out. My messages went unanswered. I knew they were reconnecting. I was the one who suggested we break up. On a quiet afternoon at the studio, Matthew looked surprised, a flicker of pain in his eyes. "Is this because you're not over Lucas?" I shook my head, my voice sincere. "No, I'm just not happy when I'm with you." He went quiet, his gaze shifting, but he didn't argue. We came together to heal, but he had already begun to betray me, and there was no reason to go on. This ending was fair for both of us. Sometimes I still hear about Lucas. Jessica is pregnant. They're planning to get engaged, but it didn't last long. They fought. Lucas didn't believe the baby was his. He forced a paternity test at 4 months, like a man gambling everything on one desperate bet. The results proved he was wrong. And when I heard, I just laughed, like hearing a story meant for entertainment. I once was foolish for love. Once begged Lucas to come back, even after knowing he cheated. Once believed that if I got pregnant, I could keep him. During our first breakup, I completely lost myself, groveling like a stray dog with no dignity, begging a man who no longer loved me. Matthew was a temporary remedy, but now I'm finally ready to walk alone.